He was 18. His brother was 19. And when they left the only home they'd ever known, all they were given was a key to a grandfather's ranch they couldn't remember, and a warning that what they found there wasn't a gift, but a test. This is the story of how we inherited a ruin, and what we discovered at the bottom of a dry well that changed not just our future, but the entire meaning of our past. If you've ever felt like you were starting from zero, with nothing but a key to a place you weren't even sure you wanted to go, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because we're going to talk about what it means to build a home out of the pieces someone else left behind. The air in Ms. Albright's sedan was thick with the smell of cheap vanilla air freshener and unspoken things. It was the same car that had picked me up from the last foster home, the one before the group home, the one where the silence was a language I learned before I learned to properly tie my shoes. My brother Sam sat beside me, his knee bouncing a frantic, silent rhythm against the worn fabric of the seat. He was staring out the window, but I knew he wasn't seeing the blur of gray highway and tired-looking pines. He was seeing the last 18 years spooling out behind us like a roll of film someone had set on fire. 18 for me, 19 for him. We were officially done, aged out. The system had spit us out with a final, perfunctory pat on the back, a thin manila envelope with our birth certificates, and the keys to a life we knew nothing about. "You two are quiet," Ms. Albright said, her eyes flicking to us in the rearview mirror. She was a woman made of tired kindness and pragmatic sighs, her entire career a testament to managing expectations downwards. We'd been her caseload for the last 6 years. "Just thinking," Sam mumbled, his voice rough. I stayed quiet. I was thinking too. I was thinking about the sterile white walls of the bedroom I'd just left, the single poster of a mountain I'd never see, tacked over a bed that was never truly mine. I was thinking about the hollow echo in the hallways after curfew, a sound that had become the soundtrack to my loneliness. 2 years of group homes, 4 years of foster care before that, and a fog of memories before that, all of it blurring into one long, continuous state of waiting. Waiting for a family that never came back. Waiting to turn 18. Now that the day was here, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being pushed off a cliff in the dark. The manila envelope sat on my lap, a flimsy shield against the terrifying weight of the future. Inside, besides the documents, was a deed, a single folded piece of paper, brittle at the creases, that said a plot of land in a town called Sparrow Creek belonged to a man named Arthur Vance, our grandfather. And now, through some legal sleight of hand I didn't understand, it belonged to us. Leo and Sam Vance, heirs to a ghost. "It's about another hour out," Ms. Albright said, trying to fill the silence again. "The lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, he sent over the address. Said the keys would be with the county clerk, but he managed to get them for you. Saved you a trip." "That was nice of him," I said, the words feeling foreign and polite in my mouth. We weren't used to people doing nice things without a form to be filled out in triplicate. Sam snorted softly. "He's the one charging the estate for his time. It's not nice, it's billable." That was Sam. He'd learned early to look for the angle, the catch, the fine print. He saw the world as a series of transactions, and the system had taught him that we were always on the losing end. I couldn't blame him. He'd taken the brunt of it, always a year older, a year more responsible, a year more exposed to the harsh realities we were shuffled through. He'd built a wall around himself, made of cynicism and sharp edges, and it was the only home he'd ever managed to keep. The city thinned out, replaced by sprawling suburbs that eventually gave way to patchy farmland and long, empty stretches of road. The sky was a vast, unforgiving gray, the color of dishwater. It felt appropriate, a world washed out, waiting for color that might never come. I clutched the envelope. Grandpa Arthur. We had a photo of him, a single faded Polaroid Ms. Albright had given us from our file. A man with kind eyes and a tired smile, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Me. Another photo showed him with his arm around a toddler with a suspicious scowl. Sam. Our parents were in the photos too, young and tragically beautiful, their faces frozen in a moment before the car crash that had turned us into wards of the state. Grandpa Arthur was supposed to be our guardian, but he'd disappeared from our lives right after. They told us he'd given us up, that he was unable to care for us. It was a wound Sam picked at constantly, but I had tried to let it scar over. What was the point of being angry at a ghost? And now that ghost had left us a ranch. The word sounded absurd. Ranch. It conjured images of cowboys and vast open plains, of sturdy fences and warm kitchens. It sounded like a home. The kind of home we'd dreamed of in hushed whispers in a dozen different bedrooms that were never ours. I was terrified that the dream was about to be obliterated by a reality of rot and rust. "There's the turnoff," Ms. Albright announced, her voice pulling me from my thoughts. She navigated the sedan down a gravel road that rattled the car's frame, sending up a plume of dust behind us. The trees grew thicker here, their branches hanging low over the road like weary arms. After another mile, a rusted mailbox appeared, leaning sideways as if exhausted. The name Vance was barely visible beneath a decade of weather and neglect. She pulled to a stop in front of a gate made of gray, splintered wood hanging from a single hinge. Beyond it, a dirt track snaked up a small hill toward a house that looked less like a home and more like a monument to decay. The word that came to mind wasn't ranch, it was ruin. My heart, which had been fluttering with a fragile, tentative hope, sank into a cold pit in my stomach. Sam let out a low, bitter laugh. "Well, there it is. Home sweet home." The house was a simple two-story farmhouse, its white paint peeled away in long strips, revealing the dark, weathered wood beneath like exposed bone. The porch sagged in the middle, and several windows were boarded up. To the left, a large barn tilted at a precarious angle, its great doors hanging open, a dark, gaping mouth. The fields on either side of the drive were overgrown with weeds and thorny bushes. The fences meant to contain them long since collapsed into tangled heaps of wire and wood. The whole place seemed to be slowly sinking back into the earth, surrendering to the relentless creep of nature. Ms. Albright killed the engine, and the silence that rushed in was profound. It was a living silence, filled with the whisper of the wind through the tall, dead grass and the distant caw of a crow. It was the sound of abandonment. She turned in her seat, her expression a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Okay, boys, this is it." She handed me a small, tarnished brass key. "This should be for the front door. Mr. Abernathy said everything inside is as is. Your grandfather passed away almost a year ago. No one's been out here since." I took the key. It was cold and heavy in my palm. This small piece of metal was the final link, the last tangible object connecting us to a life we were supposed to have had. Sam was already out of the car, his hands on his hips, surveying the wreckage of our inheritance. His face was a mask of cold fury. "He left us this? This is what we get? A pile of garbage in the middle of nowhere?" He kicked at a loose stone on the driveway, sending it skittering into the weeds. After all this time, after leaving us to rot in the system, this is his grand gesture? A joke. "Sam," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Ms. Albright cleared her throat. "The land itself is valuable, Sam. It's over 100 acres. Mr. Abernathy mentioned there's some back taxes owed, a significant amount. But the sale of the property should more than cover it and leave you with something to start with." Of course there was a catch. There was always a catch. The ranch wasn't a home. It was a debt. A final, posthumous burden from a man who had already burdened us with his absence. I looked from the collapsing house to Sam's rigid back, then to Ms. Albright's sympathetic, tired face. This was the moment. The end of one road and the start of another. A road that led right up to that broken-down front door. "Thank you for the ride, Ms. Albright," I said, forcing a small, tight smile. She nodded, her own smile just as fragile. "You have my number, and Mr. Abernathy's. Call if you need anything at all." She didn't offer to help us with our 2 duffel bags. This was the line. Her job was done. We were no longer her problem. We watched as she reversed the car, navigated the turn, and drove away, the plume of dust her only goodbye. When the sound of her engine faded, the silence returned, heavier this time. It was just us, me and Sam and the ghost of our grandfather, standing in the ruins of his life. "Well," Sam said, his voice flat, "let's go see what treasures await in our magical kingdom." We walked up the path, our footsteps loud on the gravel. I could feel the place watching us. Every boarded window was an eye. Every creak of the porch under our weight was a groan of protest. I slid the cold brass key into the lock. It was stiff, resisting at first, but with a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, I turned it. The lock gave way with a loud, grating click that echoed in the quiet air. I pushed the door open. The smell that hit me was a complex perfume of decay, dust, mold, damp wood, and the faint, sweet scent of time itself. The air inside was still and heavy, thick with memories that didn't belong to us. We stepped across the threshold, from the gray light of the outside world into the deep shadows of our new home. The door swung shut behind us with a deep, final thud, sealing us in. The foyer was a landscape of dust. A thick gray blanket covered everything. A small wooden table, a coat rack that stood like a skeletal tree, the floorboards. Cobwebs, intricate and ancient, draped from the ceiling corners like macabre chandeliers. To the right, a staircase ascended into the gloom of the second floor. To the left, a doorway led into what looked like a living room, where the furniture was hidden under ghostly white sheets. It was like stepping into a photograph from 100 years ago, a place perfectly preserved in its own neglect. Sam let out a low whistle. Wow, he really let the place go. He swiped a hand across the dusty table, leaving a clean streak. Guess housekeeping wasn't his strong suit. His attempts at humor were thin, a brittle defense against the overwhelming sense of loss that permeated the house. This wasn't just a neglected property. It was the home of a man who had died alone. I walked into the living room, my boots leaving clean prints in the dust. I pulled a sheet off a large armchair. The fabric beneath was faded floral, worn thin at the arms. I could almost picture him sitting here, an old man, surrounded by silence, the world outside his boarded windows fading away. Why hadn't he reached out? Why had he let us believe he'd abandoned us? The question was a dull ache behind my ribs, an old injury that had never properly healed. "Look at this," Sam called from the kitchen. I followed his voice. He was standing in front of a small, round table, holding up a piece of paper. It was tacked to the wall with a rusty thumbtack. An official-looking document, with red lettering at the top. I didn't need to read it to know what it was. "Foreclosure notice," Sam said, his voice devoid of emotion. "County's seizing the property for non-payment of taxes. The auction is in 30 days. He crumpled the notice in his fist. 30 days. We have 30 days to sell this dump, pay off his debts, and walk away with whatever pocket change is left. He threw the crumpled ball of paper onto the floor. "Happy 18th birthday, Leo. Welcome to the rest of your life." He stormed out of the kitchen, his footsteps thudding up the dusty staircase. I was left alone with the silence and the crumpled notice on the floor. 30 days. The number felt both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. We had a month to dismantle our grandfather's life, to sell his land, to erase him completely, all to settle a debt we hadn't incurred. It felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. I picked up the notice and smoothed it out on the table. The amount owed was staggering. More money than I had ever imagined, a figure with so many zeros it looked like a joke. Selling was the only option. It was what Ms. Albright had said, what the lawyer had implied, what Sam clearly believed. It was the logical, sensible thing to do. So why did the thought of it feel like a betrayal? I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the house alone. I moved from room to room, pulling off sheets, opening drawers, trying to piece together the life of the man who was our only link to a family. His bedroom was upstairs. A simple iron bed frame, a wooden dresser, a nightstand with a single book on it, its cover warped by damp. The closet was empty except for a pair of old work boots and a faded flannel shirt that still smelled faintly of sawdust and earth. It was the room of a man who had pared his life down to the bare essentials. There were no pictures, no letters, no personal effects. It was as if he had systematically erased himself from his own home. I found Sam in the other bedroom, a smaller room that was completely empty except for a child-sized bed frame pushed into the corner. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at a set of faint pencil marks on the doorframe. Height measurements. Sam, age 4. Leo, age 2. Our names, written in a steady, looping script. Proof. Proof that we had been here, that this had once been our home, that he had once been our grandfather, not just a name on a deed. Sam didn't look at me. "He measured us," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't even remember this room." "I don't either," I whispered, touching the faint pencil line next to my name. "So why keep it?" Sam asked, his voice raw with a pain he tried so hard to hide behind his anger. "Why keep this room, these marks on the wall, and then throw us away like we were nothing?" He stood up, his body tense. I'm done. I'm done trying to figure him out. Tomorrow, I'm calling Abernathy. We sell. We take the money and we get as far away from this place and its ghosts as we can." He walked past me, out of the room, leaving me alone with the faint pencil marks on the wall. That night, we slept on the floor in the living room, using our duffel bags as pillows. The house groaned and settled around us, a symphony of unfamiliar sounds. The wind whistled through cracks in the window frames. A floorboard creaked upstairs. I lay awake for hours, staring up at the shadowed ceiling, the weight of the house pressing down on me. Sam's plan was the only one that made sense, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something, that the house held a secret, an answer to the questions that had haunted us our entire lives. Why did he give us up? And why, after all these years of silence, did he leave us this broken, debt-ridden place? It couldn't be a cruel joke. The man who had carefully marked his grandson's heights on a doorframe wasn't a cruel man. There had to be another reason. The next morning, I woke to the pale, watery light of dawn filtering through the dusty windows. Sam was still asleep, a rare moment of peace on his usually guarded face. I slipped out of the house, the cool morning air a welcome shock after the stuffy interior. The world was quiet, draped in a thin layer of mist. I walked around the property, my sneakers damp with dew. I passed the tilting barn, its dark interior smelling of hay and thyme. I walked the perimeter of the overgrown fields, the collapsed fences a testament to years of surrender. And then I saw it. Set back from the house, partially hidden by a cluster of gnarled apple trees, was an old stone well. It was about 4 feet high, made of large gray fieldstones mortared together, a thick wooden lid covering the top. It looked ancient, solid, a part of the land itself. Something about it drew me in. It felt different from the rest of the decaying property. It felt intentional. I walked over to it, my heart starting to beat a little faster. The wooden lid was heavy, made of thick planks of oak bound with iron straps. It wasn't nailed shut, but it was swollen with years of rain and humidity, jammed tight in its stone collar. I tried to lift it, my fingers straining against the rough wood, but it wouldn't budge. I needed leverage. I went to the barn. Inside, the air was thick with the ghosts of animals. Dust motes danced in the slanted beams of light, cutting through gaps in the roof. I found what I was looking for in a corner, buried under a pile of rotting burlap sacks. A long, heavy iron crowbar. It was rusted, but solid. Back at the well, I wedged the tip of the crowbar into the thin gap between the lid and the stone. I put all my weight on it. The wood groaned in protest. I pushed harder, my muscles straining. There was a sharp crack, and the lid shifted, just an inch. Hope surged through me. I worked the crowbar around the edge, prying and lifting, sweat beading on my forehead. It was a slow, grueling process. The sun was higher now, burning off the mist. I could hear Sam calling my name from the house, his voice laced with irritation. "Leo, what the hell are you doing?" He was standing on the porch, hands on his hips. "Helping," I grunted, giving the crowbar one last desperate heave. With a loud splintering crack and a screech of rusty iron, the lid broke free. I shoved it aside. It fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Sam walked over, his expression a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. "What's so important about an old well?" He peered over the edge. "It's dry, you idiot." I leaned over beside him, breathing heavily. He was right. The well shaft dropped about 30 feet into darkness, but there was no glint of water, no damp, earthy smell. The bottom was just dark. But it wasn't empty. Lying in the center of the dry, packed earth at the bottom was a dark, rectangular shape. A box. A metal box, about the size of a shoebox. My breath caught in my throat. "It's not empty." Sam stared down, his cynicism momentarily forgotten. "What is that?" "I don't know," I said, "but I think we're supposed to find it." Getting to the box was the next problem. The well was too deep to climb down, the stone walls slick with moss. But there was a thick, rotting rope tied to the old winch mechanism above the well. It looked ancient, but it might hold. "We need to get it," I said. "No way," Sam said, shaking his head. "That rope is a death trap. And for what? Some box of junk? Forget it, Leo. Let's just call the lawyer." "No," I insisted, a stubborn certainty taking root in me. This was it. This was the answer. I could feel it. This is why he left us the ranch. Not for the land, not for the house. For this, whatever is in that box. I tested the rope. It was thick, and while the outside was frayed, the core felt solid. I tied the crowbar to the end, a makeshift grappling hook. It took me a dozen tries, casting the heavy iron bar down into the darkness, the clang of it hitting the bottom echoing up to us. Finally, on what I'd decided would be my last attempt, I felt it catch on something. I pulled gently. It held. I began to haul it up, hand over hand, the rope cutting into my palms. It was heavy. Sam, seeing the look on my face, grabbed the rope behind me and started to pull, his skepticism giving way to the raw physical effort of the task. Together, we hauled the box up out of the darkness. It emerged into the sunlight, covered in dirt and cobwebs. It was an old military-style ammo can, painted dark green, its sides dented and scratched. A heavy padlock secured the latch. We set it on the ground between us, both of us breathing hard, staring at our prize. "Now what?" Sam asked. "We don't have a key for that." "Don't need one," I said, picking up the crowbar. I wedged the tip under the padlock's hasp, and, with a single sharp blow from a rock, I broke it. The sound was loud and final in the morning quiet. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We just looked at the box, at the broken lock. It felt like we had crossed a line, broken a seal on the past. This was the point of no return. I reached out and unlatched the lid. It opened with a faint hiss of escaping air. I lifted it. Inside, nestled in what looked like yellowed cheesecloth, were stacks and stacks of money. $100 bills, bundled in paper bands. My mind couldn't even process the amount. It was more money than we had ever seen, more than we could have ever dreamed of. It was enough to pay the taxes 10 times over. It was a fortune. Sam just stared, his mouth open. I don't believe it," he whispered. He reached in and touched one of the bundles, as if to confirm it was real. He was a hermit. He lived in a ruin. How? But underneath the money, there was something else. A large, thick manila envelope, sealed with wax. My name, Leo, was written on the front in that same familiar, looping script from the doorframe. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the real treasure. The money was just a means to an end. This was the reason. My hands were shaking as I lifted the envelope out. It was heavy, filled with what felt like many pages. I broke the wax seal. Inside was a stack of papers, covered in dense handwriting, and a smaller sealed envelope with Sam's name on it. I handed it to him. He took it, looking at it like it was a venomous snake. I unfolded the first page of my letter. The ink was slightly faded, the paper soft with age. And I began to read my grandfather's words. "My dear Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means 2 things. First, it means I am gone. For that, I am sorry. I hope my end was peaceful. Second, it means you found this box. You were clever enough and stubborn enough to look where no one else would. I always knew you were the thoughtful one. That stubbornness will serve you well. Leo, I know you have questions. I know you and your brother have grown up believing I abandoned you. I know you think I was a coward or cruel or both. I need you to understand that every decision I made from the moment your parents died was to protect you, not from poverty or from loneliness, but from something much, much worse." I paused, my throat tight. I looked at Sam, He was still staring at his unopened letter, his knuckles white. I continued reading, my voice a low murmur in the quiet morning. Your father, my son, was a good man, but he fell in with the wrong people. Not criminals in the way you might think, not gangsters or thugs. These were men in expensive suits. They ran a development company, a powerful one. They strong-armed landowners, using threats and legal loopholes to buy up property for pennies on the dollar. Your father was their lawyer. He was young, ambitious, and he didn't see the rot until it was too late. When he tried to get out, to expose them, they threatened him. They threatened your mother. They threatened you boys. The car crash. It was no accident, Leo. It was a message. They made it look clean, but I know it wasn't. They killed my son and his wife to silence them. And they made it clear that if I went to the police, or if I tried to keep you two, you would be next. They wanted me to disappear, to let you be swallowed by the system where they couldn't be connected to you. They told me that if you ever came back here, if you ever tried to claim this land, which they wanted, which they've always wanted, they would finish the job. I had to stop reading. The world tilted on its axis. The quiet ranch, the warm sun, the chirping of birds, it all felt like a lie. A peaceful facade hiding a dark, violent truth. My parents hadn't died in an accident. They were murdered. And our grandfather hadn't abandoned us. He had sacrificed his entire life, his relationship with us, his own happiness, to keep us safe. He had lived in poverty and isolation, letting his home fall to ruin, making himself a ghost, all to protect us from the men who had destroyed our family. I cried. I didn't even realize it at first, just felt the hot tears tracking through the dust on my cheeks. I cried for the parents I never knew, murdered for trying to do the right thing. I cried for the grandfather who had lived and died alone, carrying a burden too heavy for any one person to bear. And I cried for the two little boys who grew up feeling unwanted, believing a lie that was designed to save their lives. Sam had opened his letter. I could see his shoulders shaking as he read. The money in the box, which moments before had seemed like a miracle, now felt like blood money, a heavy, cursed treasure. What were we supposed to do with it? What were we supposed to do with this truth? My letter continued. The money in this box is everything I ever had, and everything your father had saved. It was clean money from before. I hid it away. It's yours. There is enough to pay the taxes and then some. There is enough for you and Sam to take it and disappear. You could go anywhere, start a new life, and never look back. No one would blame you. In many ways, it's the safest thing to do. The company is still out there. They are still powerful. The man who runs it, a man named Marcus Thorne, is patient. He has been waiting for me to die for years, waiting for the county to seize this land so he could buy it at auction, clean and quiet. But there is another option, the harder one. The land is yours. This home is yours. It was bought and paid for with honest work by your great-grandparents. It is your birthright. You could stay. You could use the money to pay the debt, to fix the house, to make this place a home again, to live the life you were robbed of. But if you do that, Thorne will know. He will come for you. He won't use violence this time, not at first. He'll use lawyers and money and influence. He will try to break you. I have left you one more thing. In the bottom of this box, under the false bottom, is a ledger. It was your father's. It contains all the proof of Thorne's crimes, the intimidation, the blackmail, the fraud, everything. Your father was going to take it to the authorities the day he died. I couldn't. It would have put you in danger. But you are adults now. The choice is yours. You can run and live, or you can stay and fight. I cannot tell you which to choose. I can only tell you that I am sorry for the burden I have placed on you. Whatever you decide, know that I loved you. I loved you both more than anything in this world. Your grandpa, Arthur. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the paper. I looked in the box. I felt around the bottom and found the edge of a false panel. I pried it up, and there it was, a slim, black leather-bound ledger. It felt cold to the touch. Sam finished his letter and looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed, his face a mess of grief and rage I had never seen on him before. His cynicism was gone, burned away by the terrible truth. In its place was a raw, wounded vulnerability. "He loved us," Sam said, his voice cracking. "All this time, he was protecting us." We sat there for a long time, the box open between us, the sun climbing higher in the sky. The silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a held breath, the silence before a choice. Run or fight. Disappear or reclaim our home. Let the ghosts of the past lie or seek justice for them. The logical choice, the sensible choice Sam would have made just yesterday, was to take the money and run. To disappear so completely that Marcus Thorne and his company would never find us. It was the life our grandfather had bought for us with his own loneliness. But as I looked around at the collapsing barn, the sagging porch, the overgrown fields, I didn't see a ruin anymore. I saw a legacy. I saw a battlefield. I saw a home that had been waiting for us. And I saw those pencil marks on the doorframe. Leo, age 2. This place wasn't just a property. It was the last piece of our family we had left. Running away felt like a second abandonment, like we would be finishing the job that Thorne had started all those years ago, erasing the Vance family from Sparrow Creek. "I'm not running," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I looked Sam in the eye. "I'm staying. This is our home. He didn't sacrifice his whole life just for us to let some monster pave it over." Sam stared at me, and for a second I saw the old, scared Sam, the one who had always looked for the escape route. But then something hardened in his gaze, a fire I hadn't seen since we were kids, the time he'd stood up to a bully twice his size from me. He looked down at the ledger in my hands, then back at me. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "We stay. We fight." It was the most terrifying and the most liberating decision of my life. In that moment, we stopped being orphans, wards of the state, victims of circumstance. We became our grandfather's grandsons. We became our father's sons. We had a purpose. We had a home to save. The weight of the choice was immense, but for the first time since I could remember, I didn't feel like I was adrift. I felt anchored. Anchored to this land, to this truth, to my brother. The first step was the taxes. The next morning, we drove into the town of Sparrow Creek in the beat-up pickup truck we found in the barn. It had taken us half a day to get it started, but the engine eventually rumbled to life, a small miracle in a place that had seemed devoid of them. The town was small, a single main street with a handful of storefronts. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. We stuck out like sore thumbs. The county clerk's office was in a squat brick building next to the post office. The woman behind the counter, a formidable figure with a tower of gray hair and sharp, suspicious eyes, looked at us over her glasses when we walked in. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she very much doubted it. "We're here to pay the back taxes on the Vance property," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I pushed a cashier's check, made out for the full amount, across the counter. We had spent the previous evening counting a fraction of the money, our hands shaking, the sheer reality of it still hard to grasp. The clerk's eyes widened as she looked at the check. She picked it up as if it might bite her. The Vance property? The auction is scheduled for next week. A developer has already put in a preliminary bid. Well, you can tell them the property is no longer for sale, Sam said, his voice sharp. He was standing beside me, a solid, protective presence. It's our family's land, and we're keeping it. The clerk stared at us, her mind clearly racing. She made a phone call, her voice a low, urgent murmur. We waited, the silence in the small office stretching out. Finally, she hung up and began stamping our paperwork with a series of loud, final thuds. She didn't look happy about it. We had just disrupted a plan that had likely been in motion for a long time. We had made our first enemy without even trying. As she handed us the receipt, her expression was cold. Everything is in order. The property is yours. Walking out of that office was like walking into a different life. We had done it. The ranch was ours. The feeling was heady, a mixture of triumph and terror. We had fired the first shot. Now we had to prepare for the war. Our grandfather's letter had mentioned one other person, a lawyer named Elias Rowe. He was your father's best friend, the letter said. He knows some of the truth, but not all of it. He can be trusted. We found his office above the town's only diner. It was a small, cluttered space filled with towers of books and files. Elias Rowe was a man who looked like he was made of the same stuff as the old books he surrounded himself with. Worn, a little frayed, but sturdy. He had kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than you were showing. We told him everything. We showed him the letters. We showed him the ledger. He listened patiently, his expression growing more grave with each word. When we were done, he leaned back in his creaky chair and was silent for a long time. I knew it, he finally said, his voice a low rumble. I knew there was something wrong with that accident, and I knew Arthur wouldn't have just left you boys, not without a damn good reason. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the quiet Main Street. Marcus Thorne. He's a cancer. He's been poisoning this county for 20 years, buying up family farms, bleeding communities dry. Your father, he was the first person who had the courage and the evidence to stop him. After he died, the case fell apart. The evidence disappeared. Or so we thought. He turned to face us, his eyes locking on to the ledger on his desk. This changes everything. What do we do? I asked. For now, you lay low, he said. You fix up that ranch. You make it a home. You live. Let Thorne think he's only lost a piece of property. He'll send his lawyers. They'll try to harass you with zoning laws and property line disputes. We'll fight them. Meanwhile, I'm going to take this ledger to some people I trust. People outside of this county. People Thorne can't buy. We're going to build a case, quietly, and when the time is right, we're going to cut the head off the snake. For the next 6 months, that's what we did. We worked. We poured our grief and our anger and our fragile hope into the land. We started with the house, clearing out the years of dust and decay. We tore out rotten floorboards, patched the roof, replaced the broken windows. Every swing of a hammer, every coat of paint, felt like an act of defiance. We were reclaiming not just a building, but our own history. We were building a home with our own 2 hands. Sam, who I'd always thought was allergic to hard work, was a revelation. He attacked the work with a ferocious energy, as if he could physically beat back the ghosts of the past. He taught himself plumbing from old manuals we found in the barn. He rewired the entire house, his brow furrowed in concentration. And slowly, I saw the walls he had built around himself start to come down. We talked more than we had in our entire lives. We talked about our parents, about our grandfather, about the years we'd lost. We argued and we laughed and we worked, side by side, from sunrise to sunset. The community, which had at first been suspicious of us, began to warm. The owner of the hardware store started giving us a discount. Our nearest neighbor, an old farmer named George, would drop off vegetables from his garden on our porch. They saw what we were doing. They saw us bringing the old Vance place back to life, and they respected it. We were no longer outsiders. We were becoming part of the fabric of Sparrow Creek. Thorne's lawyers came, just as Elias had predicted. They sent official-looking letters about easements and septic regulations. They tried to bury us in paperwork. But Elias handled them, a calm, steady bulwark against their attacks. Their efforts were annoying, but toothless. For a while, it seemed like we might have actually won. Then, one evening, a sleek black car came up our newly graded driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was older, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. I knew instantly who he was. Marcus Thorne. He walked up to the porch where Sam and I were sitting, exhausted after a long day of rebuilding the barn. "Quite the transformation," he said, his voice smooth and polished. "You boys have done some impressive work. Your grandfather would be proud." "What do you want?" Sam asked, his voice tight. Thorne's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I'm a businessman. I like to solve problems. There's been a misunderstanding, some friction with my legal team. I'm here to make you an offer, a generous one. Triple the market value for this land. Cash. You can walk away from this complicated history. Start fresh somewhere else." He was offering us the easy way out again. The same choice our grandfather had given us. Run and live. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice was steady when I spoke. "This land isn't for sale, not for any price." Thorne looked at me, his eyes narrowing. The friendly mask dropped, and for a moment I saw the predator underneath. The man who had murdered my parents and condemned my grandfather to a life of lonely exile. "That's a sentimental answer, son, and sentimentality is expensive. You're making a mistake." "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "The mistake was yours. You thought we were just a loose end. You thought you could just sweep us away. But we're still here, and we're not going anywhere." He stared at me for a long moment, then a slow, cold smile spread across his face. "We'll see," he said. He turned, got back in his car, and drove away. We watched until his car was a speck in the distance. The threat was no longer a ghost. It had a face and a name. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. But this time, we weren't scared. We were ready. That night, Elias called. "It's time," he said. "The district attorney is ready to move. They're issuing the warrants tomorrow morning." The next day, it was all over the news. Marcus Thorne arrested. His company's offices raided. The story of his corruption, his crimes, his reign of terror over the county finally brought to light. The key piece of evidence, they said, was a ledger that had belonged to a young lawyer murdered 2 decades ago. His name was Daniel Vance, my father. His story was finally being told. His name was finally being cleared. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be trials, legal battles, and the deep, complex grief would never fully go away. The scars of our childhood were still there. But as I stood on the newly repaired porch of our home, looking out at the fields we were planning to cultivate, with my brother standing beside me, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known. We had done it. We had faced the monster that had haunted our family, and we had won. We found our grandfather's grave in the small town cemetery. It was a simple, unmarked stone. We bought him a proper headstone. It read, "Arthur Vance, a loving grandfather, a guardian." We stood there, Sam and I, and we told him what we'd done. We told him we were home. And I felt, in the quiet whisper of the wind through the tall pines, that he knew. The inheritance he left us wasn't the money in the box. It wasn't even the land. It was the choice. The choice to face the past instead of running from it. The choice to fight for what was right, no matter how hard it was. He taught us that a home isn't just a roof over your head. It's the ground you're willing to defend. It's the history you're willing to fight for. It's the family you build from the broken pieces you've been given. And that's a lesson that I want to share with all of you. So many of us are handed a life that feels like a ruin, a place of debt and decay and painful memories. It's so tempting to just walk away, to take the easy path and try to forget. But sometimes the most valuable things are buried deep, hidden in the places that look the most broken. Sometimes you have to be willing to go down into the well, to face the darkness, to find the truth that's waiting for you. What you do with that truth defines who you are. So I want to ask you, what's the well in your life? What's the broken down place you've been avoiding that might just hold the key to who you're meant to be? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, because this community is built on sharing the stories of how we rebuild. And if this story meant something to you, if it gave you a little bit of hope that you can turn your own ruin into a home, then please subscribe to the channel, because we're all in this together, learning to fight for our own piece of ground.